So I went out there with Harlan. We get there, and Lane's just got up to speak. And those of you who don't know Lane, he's a big, not a real big guy. He's probably, what, 6 foot tall or something? And he was a Marine. He stood up straight. And he had one of these Beatle-type haircuts with the part right down the middle. And Lane had this unique quality that I don't have. My wife says, I don't have it. But he could speak very softly. And people would give them their rapt attention. So when I got there with Harlan, Lane was already speaking. And there was about 20 people. We're not a big crowd. Nobody thought he was going to win, right? And I don't remember all the things he said, but I do remember this. I can still hear his voice. I'm sure you can hear his voice too. You can hear his voice in my head. He said, every American should have a job. And every American should be able to have that job and at a living wage. And every American should be able to see a doctor when they're sick and not face bankruptcy when the bill comes due. And this is the key point. Every individual American should be treated with all the dignity and respect that their actions have earned. Whether they're white or black or Hispanic or gay, it doesn't make any difference. Those were the core messages that we got from the Democratic Party at that time. And Lane gave that message throughout the district. I honestly didn't get involved in his campaign. I wrote a couple checks, but I had better things than to work on what might be a losing campaign. After the election, early in the morning, I had the practice of getting up about 6 o'clock and going down to Katie's. Katie's, I don't know if it's still there or not, but go down there and buy my newspapers. And Sam Bizzardo, you remember Sam? Everybody remember Sam Bizzardo? I walk in and Sam's, he's working on the papers and all. He said, well, our boy won. What do you mean our boy won? Evans won. And your friend down in Springfield, Durbin, he won too. And Stevenson, he may win, but he's just close. We don't know yet. And I was shocked, truly, truly shocked. Well, Lane did a very unusual thing after the election. He went to Washington and did exactly what he said he was going to do. He voted, in fact, out of the 435 congressmen, his voting record was the most anti-Reagan on economics of any. I can relate to that because they all want you to get down to Springfield or the Washington and they say, no, you can't vote this way. You got to look like a Republican so you can get reelected. Well, Lane didn't do that. And another funny thing happens when a guy he supported, wrote checks to, and worked on his campaign does the exact thing he told you he was going to do. The next time out, you're going to help him even more. And so we had more people coming in. We must have had 25, 30 people working on his campaign. Because Kenny McMillan never conceded. I remember hearing on the radio that same day, he said, I'm running again in 1984. We're going to raise more money and we're going to work harder. We're going to beat this Lane Evans. Well, that got everybody energized. Lane ended up winning again in 1984. Reagan won, as you would expect. He got 53% of the vote, 54% of the vote, I think. But Evans got 57. And by the end of the decade, Evans had an opponent every election. In fact, he had an opponent, well-funded opponent, every election through his whole term until he retired in 2006. But by the end of the 1990, he won what Reagan had won that district with 57% of the vote. Evans won it with 67% of the vote. Can you imagine that? In the meantime, I won an election. And this group had grown from about 20 to about 100 people. In fact, when Paul Simon ran for president, we sent 150 what were called bow tie brigaders to Iowa to campaign for Paul Simon. And only one other county in the state sent more volunteers than McDonough County and the McDonough County Democratic Coalition. Okay. And that was Cook County. So we had made a great progress. Downstate, rural America, I think, was looking for a change, looking for a different way of addressing the loss of jobs and the economic stress they were facing. In fact, in downstate, we had 8 Democratic congressmen. 6 of them were Democrats. Today, we have 6 downstate congressmen, and only one of them is what she calls herself a no labels Democrat. Okay. Why did that happen? Well, I don't have enough time to tell you all why I think it happened. And I think it happened because we've got to stop really just blaming Republicans. We have our own problems too. NAFTA came through, ran through a Democratic House. We have lost 297,000 manufacturing jobs in Illinois since NAFTA passed in 1994. Now, not all of them will be because of that, but that's a third of our manufacturing. We gave Communist China most favored nation status. We deregulated the financial banks and institutions. We essentially crushed Glass-Steagall. We reappointed Alan Greenspan, the Ayn Rand acolyte. I mean, we've done a lot of things as Democrats, and there were Clinton's initiatives, that have led to this economic stagnation. That the fact that instead of making $124,000 today, a median income family is down at $64,000 or $65,000. So let me close with what I believe really is the essence of the Democratic Party. In April of 1945, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt died. He died in a small community of Warm Springs, Georgia, a community which he had established for polio sufferers like himself. He had taken half of his net worth and invested it in a rundown resort area for polio sufferers. He died. And there was a lot of anguish throughout the nation. And as they were carrying his casket to the small Warm Springs rail station for the 700-mile trip back to Washington, there were a crowd had gathered as they went along that whole 700 miles. There'd be hundreds of thousands of people before we had TV. There were northern reporters there, and they were looking for a local story. And they spied an elderly African-American man dressed in his Sunday best. And he was crying uncontrollably. And this reporter went over to him and said, excuse me, do you know Roosevelt? Have you spoken with him? Have you met with him? Has he done anything special for you? How do you know Roosevelt? He was crying uncontrollably. And the old African-American distinguished man looked up and said, no, I don't know President Roosevelt. I've never met him. I've never spoken to him. He's never done me any favors. I guess you'd say, truly, I don't know him. But he knows me. He knows me. FDR had. He could give people the feeling that he cared about their dreams, about their lives, about their hopes in this world. FDR could do that. Lane Evans did that. That's why he could win with 67% of the vote. Finally, again, I'm going to say, I heard it from Lane, and I've done research, of course, on FDR, and many times I'd hear Paul Simon say the same thing. Every American deserves a job at a living wage, and every American should be able to see a doctor when they're sick and not face bankruptcy when the bill comes due, and every individual American should be treated with all the dignity and respect that their actions deserve, not because of their skin color or their sexual relationships. George Carlin once said, "That's the American dream." It's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it. Well, it's time to wake up, and this group is part of that. We not only have to wake up and remember, those are simple concepts, we can remember them, but we have to do something about it, take action about it. That's what this group was and can be, and hopefully will be going forward. And you know what? If we do that, if we remember, if we take actions, find good candidates like John and run them, whether they have a chance to win or not. They need to have a challenge out there. They need to have somebody articulating our viewpoints. And if we do that, we remember, we take action. And FDR, and Harry Truman, and LBJ, and our late great friend and Marine, Congressman Lane Evans, well, they live forever. Thank you.
I just want to say that